Meta's been making a lot of changes, different updates to their algorithm, and they're pushing for more consolidation. And we want to see some better alignment there while still staying true to who we are and making sure that our spend is profitable and really having an impact on the top line here.
This episode of the E-commerce Playbook podcast is brought to you by Aaliyah, the best pop-up tool in D2C. At Aaliyah, all they do is pop-ups. It's all they care about. It's what they live and breathe. Nike Strength, Plunge, Create Gummies, Patrick Ta, Brez, and Hostage Tape are some of the 900 plus brands using Aaliyah. They focus on robust analytics, real A/B testing that delivers meaningful insights, lightning fast load times, and an impressive range of customization options. What truly sets Aaliyah apart, though, is the support team. They're incredibly responsive, genuinely helpful, and will build your pop-ups for you. If you book a demo with them and mention our podcast on the demo, they'll do 30 days free and 20% off. Find them at aaliyahlearn.com. That's ALIA learn.com. Hey, folks, welcome to the E-commerce Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Richard Gaffin, Director of Digital Product Strategy here at Common Thread Collective. And we have two very special guests with us today. We have Delaney Quinn, who is our Director of Paid Social here at Common Thread Collective, and Mr. Tony Chopp, returning, our VP of Paid Media here at Common Thread. What's going on, guys?
Nice to see you, Richard. I feel like we've been spending a bunch of time together recently, and I'm here for it.
Oh, absolutely. Same.
Yeah, happy.
Delaney, what's that?
I said I'm happy to be joining.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I think what we want to talk through today is something that we've been having conversations at the agency about over the past 2-3 weeks, which is all of the ways that we have been shifting our buying methodology here at Common Thread Collective to accommodate some of the ways that Meta is changing its algorithm, changing some of the tools, and there's some of the tools available to media buyers as well. So essentially what we want to do here is just walk through, give you guys a sense of how we're shifting our strategy here at CTC and kind of what the upshot is, I think, for everybody in general. So let's dive in here. Maybe we'll start with you, Delaney, just talking about essentially the end of the cost cap agency era, which is kind of what we were calling ourselves, and towards something else. So talk about what we were and kind of what we're shifting towards.
Yeah, and we're still loving cost caps here. We're still using cost caps, but we're moving into a different phase of what was the cost cap agency era. We're looking to be still very disciplined in driving a rigid framework for our clients and having an impact on overall business. That's still something that's super important to us, but we want to do that in a little bit of a different approach. So we used to come in and be super, super structured and look at a 7-day click only attribution window. Everything would have a cost control. We would give every single new concept a new campaign in these accounts. We got really, really broken out and segmented. And we want to see some changes to this. Meta's been making a lot of changes, different updates to their algorithm, and they're pushing for more consolidation. And we want to see some better alignment there while still staying true to who we are and making sure that our spend is profitable and really having an impact on the top line here.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry, Richard. You were going to say something. I have so much to say about this topic, as having been through many seasons at CTC, like reflecting on this portion of the journey, which I think probably represents like really 2022 and 2023, the post-pandemic challenges that many of our brands went through, the supply chain issues, et cetera, and also the evolution of the CTC system, the growth map and stat list, and how we operationalize and execute the service. What happened over those years was a lot of rigorousness in our media buying strategy, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually really good. In the rigorousness, like, so if I were to look at a Meta Ads account in 2023 here at CTC, what I would see is many campaigns, 20, 30, 40, 50 campaigns, all of them using cost cap bidding and all of them using 7-day click, really exclusively. And that gave us a really, really structured framework and a really strong identity for who CTC is and how we execute media buying strategy. I think it was I think it was really helpful for us to help our clients create this predictable, profitable growth that we were after at the time.
Mhm.
So, and it's just really fascinating to see how not only is meta changing, but also the needs of our clients are changing as we go into this into the future. And it's not enough just to create profit. We have to find ways to amplify growth. And what Delaney's doing here is helping us take what works really well, take the pieces that worked really well from this season, which is about a heavy focus on using bidding that allows us to control for downside risk, but also beginning to open the aperture into different ways of exploring the growth side of the equation. And she's going to talk about some thoughts about attribution, thoughts about testing, but I think this is just such a fascinating turning point for our journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like one thing I'll observe here, because I think it's important to call out, is what you said earlier, Delaney, which is that what we are not saying is that cost caps are over. We're saying cost controls are now part of a slightly more flexible system that we're building. And I think prior to this, like you were pointing out, Tony, prior to this shift, rather, we were very, very strict. And part of the reason we were strict is that Meta itself was not providing the tools that we needed to create the outcomes that we wanted for our clients. I think that's kind of a big part of this as well. And that's shifted somewhat. So let's talk about then the specifics around what's changed. So we know kind of the direction it's going, but what specifically are we changing here?
Yeah, I would say there's like two different main pillars of this, right? What are we here at CTC doing, and what has Meta changed? Because Meta has seen a plethora of changes, the rollout of different bidding tactics and platforms, so many updates to their algorithm. The most recent one here just hitting us. They're moving into this idea of ASC only and having your 3 turn-ons within those campaigns. Alongside all of that, as an agency, we are truly embracing measurement and incrementality to prove out all of these changes happening in platform and in the algorithm. And we're backing that with testing roadmaps and findings and having solid results and being okay with tests not being successful, knowing that Meta is pushing changes. They have incremental attribution that they're testing. We're not sure if that'll be successful, but we believe in incrementality reads behind that and a testing roadmap to prove it out.
Gotcha. Okay, so we'll go into kind of each one of these things specifically, but let's double back to kind of what you were saying, Tony, around opening the aperture for growth, because I want to dig into that a little bit. And you mentioned a little bit prior, like our current buying, or I should say our previous buying methodology was a little bit strict and a little bit limited, or it was becoming limiting. So talk about what these changes do to kind of accommodate the idea of opening the aperture for growth.
Yeah, I think the best way to approach this question is through the idea of attribution.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna pair that with the simultaneous journey that CTC has gone on over the last 6 or 8 months in incrementality measurement.
Mm-hmm.
So past time, every CTC campaign you would look at in a meta ads account, 7-day click, right? We knew intuitively and from experience that using 7-day click would help us create the business outcomes that we were seeking. We also knew intuitively and from experience that using longer review attribution windows could be problematic in different accounts as far as being able to control for spend or spending more but not seeing the business outcomes. So we sort of, absent having a more complete measurement framework, a la incrementality, we defaulted to 7-day click because it's safe and it's predictable, honestly.
This episode of the E-commerce Playbook podcast is brought to you by Aaliyah, the best pop-up tool in D2C. At Aaliyah, all they do is pop-ups. It's all they care about. It's what they live and breathe. Nike Strength, Plunge, Create Gummies, Patrick Ta, Brez, and Hostage Tape are some of the 900 plus brands using Aaliyah. They focus on robust analytics, real A/B testing that delivers meaningful insights, lightning fast load times, and an impressive range of customization options. What truly sets Alea apart, though, is the support team. They're incredibly responsive, genuinely helpful, and will build your pop-ups for you. If you book a demo with them and mention our podcast on the demo, they'll do 30 days free and 20% off. Find them at alealearn.com. That's ALIA learn.com.
So, but I'm going to talk about a specific example of a place where employing a wider attribution window maybe is likely useful and perhaps even necessary. The example is accounts that have lower conversion volume for whatever reason. Two of the common reasons could be smaller budget or really, really high AOV. We've had a bunch of experiences with accounts over the last year or two that have an AOV that's much higher than our sort of normal $80, $100 AOV. Think about things like furniture, $600,000, $800,000 AOV. The challenge in these situations is about getting enough signal into the advertising account to operate in the way that we want to operate, which is to use the bidding algorithms to make the bidding decisions, right? So this is a perfect example of how, when we're looking at and evaluating a business, our key guiding post for any campaign is that we can get out of the learning phase, that we can get 50 conversions per week. One of the ways that we may be able to do that is by incorporating one-day view attribution if the budget requirements necessitate that we have to get more signal into the thing. So that's one way of thinking about opening the aperture, incorporate view attribution in a smart way, in a necessary way to feed the algorithm the information it needs to optimize.
Right.
I'm gonna add one more point. Delaney's got a bunch. Just one more point. The thing about attribution and measurement in general is the way that I think about it is it's not a right or wrong sort of problem. It's not that 7-day click is right and 7 and 1 is wrong. What is for sure true is that they have a different incremental contribution to the business. So the other thing that has been part of this journey of measurement of incrementality is learning something really, really simple, which is when we run really tight click attribution on Meta, what's actually happening is what we see reported in Meta is actually underreported. So if your Meta ads account is showing a 2-to-1 and you're on 7-day click, the results, your business results, are actually likely better than that. The flip side of the coin is view attribution, or longer attribution windows in general, are not no incrementality. They're just less, right? Likely less. So in that same Meta ads account, if it was 7-day click and it was reporting a 2, that's likely underreporting by a little bit. And if there's view attribution in there, it's likely overreporting a little bit. But it's not one is totally right, one is totally wrong. It's the spectrum is closer than that. And this connects to how we set targets, how our growth strategy team sets targets. Okay, I'll shut up. I know you guys have stuff.
I think that piece though is so important that you were ending on right there, because that's where you can see this type of test go wrong. If you want to look at your higher AOV product, you add view into your account and you don't change your cost control and platform, you're going to see an inflation in performance and more spend, but your business isn't going to feel that impact. You need to rely on the incrementality side of it and readjust those targets, or else testing into something like this, you're not going to feel the impact in the way that you should. And I think that's a piece that you can get wrong really easily with brands if you're not adjusting anything accordingly. It can't just be apples to apples. We got to make a little bit of a change there.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through this, and I think we should put this up as a visual on, at least on the YouTube. But this is like kind of a breakdown of all of the different dimensions by which we are sort of changing our overall campaign structure or our overall buying strategy, I guess. So Delaney, why don't you walk us through each one of those? You've already touched on some of them, but just to kind of give us a summary of what's happening.
Sure. And before I jump into that too, the one thing I will say is it's laid out this way for a very important reason, because we want to take a real sequential approach to these things so we can feel the impact of the changes we're making. We're not going into accounts or recommending you reset to all of these best practices. we're following kind of down this chart of making those optimizations in platform, starting with bidding. We believe that bidding can have a really big impact in the account. Cost controls used to be the way to go. We're seeing a mix of different cost controls. So cost cap, bid cap, or a min ROAS work well. They're operating on two very different systems in the platform, looking at value versus volume, and that can have different impacts on the business. If you're trying to grow a higher AOV product, maybe the value min ROAS is the way to go. If you need more volume of purchases and conversions in your account, cost controls, and the mix of them together works really well. We're also testing to some highest volume, very small, percentage is our recommendation, but we're seeing that work in some places, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We've talked a lot about attribution, really testing into by need for view, but our best practice is to rely on a 7-day click to get your campaigns out of learning. Something that is a little different for us is we used to really look at concept. Every new concept got a new campaign. We're moving towards consolidation and ad sets and ABO, where we still have some control in the algorithm and how we're pushing spend to these ad sets. But you're going to see a lot less campaigns live in a CTC account now than you would a year ago today. We have some updates to our audience strategy, looking at lapsed customers, an audience that we used to overlook. We would just group them in with those active audiences, but it's an audience that you can nurture a little bit and pull them back into the fold after that lapse point. And lastly, which I think this is a really, really big one that aligns well with Meta, we really use creative for scale. And that still stands, but it's diverse creative that's going to reach a new audience and take your account to the next level. If you're seeing stagnant new customer growth and you're still pumping in a bunch of volume, you can't break your top winner. You're not diverse enough. You need to find a different angle or offer or a pathway to go down to see that next unlock.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll dig into each one of those kind of one by one. But I think like the first thing is that we should dig into is the sequential testing or the sequence of kind of rolling some of this stuff out. So talk to us about like why it's important to do this and kind of the way that we're, and I guess what the sequence is.
Yeah. So if you go into an account tomorrow and you say, okay, I want to follow all of CTC's best practices. I'm going to reset my bidding from 7-day click to 7-day only. I'm going to put a cost control in there. I am going to redefine all my audiences. Your account is going to be very confused. You're also not going to be able to point to that. You're probably going to see a little bit of a decline in spend while you stabilize out. You might feel the impact on new customer revenue. And we don't want that to happen for our brands. So a sequential approach is really important so we can point to each change we made and the impact it had on the brand. Starting with bidding, that is something that we really do believe in, getting into a solid spot and making sure we have the cost controls in place, moving into attribution and following that up with audiences.
So we touched a little bit on cost caps and min ROAS and why both of those matter. And they're both cost controls, right, in a sense. So it's not necessarily like, although you did allude to highest volume earlier, it's not necessarily that we're saying every single bit of type is great, but talk about like why including both of these is important.
Definitely. So a lot of times you'll see brands will come and they'll be like, I'm not selling enough of a certain product. I'm hitting revenue goals maybe, but I need to get through inventory. I need to push volume. I'm going to recommend that you launch a campaign on a cost control. It's really good at going after the cheapest conversion it can get within that control you have in place. It's going to drive up your purchases, but it isn't going to help you drive more AOV or more revenue. And that's where we'll see from the value side. If we want to say maybe it's an apparel company and they package up their things, you can get 2-3 at a time. I would set that on a min ROAS, go after value. You need a little higher AOV. It's going to reach that for you. Same brand, 2 different cost controls in place, 2 different reasons. So that's what you'll typically see. You'll have a different reason for activating on both, but they both work well together and can help support the business. It's not one or the other.
Gotcha. And I just want to ask, or Tony, you got something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the other thing that's interesting about bidding in general is the connection to the audience that gets targeted. So we see this across advertising platforms. Like basically the way to say it is you get what you ask for, right? Mm-hmm. So, and regardless of what advertising platform you're talking about, the bidding strategy you use has an impact on the audience that gets targeted. So I think one of the things that's interesting about this idea of like deploying both cost cap and min ROAS is the potential to hit different audiences through the mechanism of having different bidding. And then the other thing, just to add to ROAS, like connecting back to the idea of how the Meta platform is changing. So ROAS is the newest bidding strategy available in Meta ads. And then connecting to the whole ASC arc, ASC, when it first launched, ROAS, there's actually no cost control bidding available in the very beginning. Then CTC is like, okay, well, that's kind of sketchy. We can't use that. And then we got cost control. And then we finally got ROAS available to us in ASC. And now we're getting the messaging from Meta about like, hey, no more BAU campaigns, only ASC. So I think it's just interesting to think about, and this connects back to this idea of like, as the Meta platform changes, we need to evolve our media buying strategy alongside it.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. Is that part of it is that like the platform has evolved to allow us to achieve the goals that we want to achieve for our clients in a way that that just wasn't the case before. As you mentioned, ASC not having cost controls at first, that sort of thing. It creates this scenario where we have to do a workaround, but that's not quite the same. Or that scenario is not quite the same anymore. So speaking of which, because I think this is an interesting one, let's move on to attribution. Double back to that real quick. Talk about bringing in 7-day click, 1-day view. So Tony already mentioned a couple of circumstances in which bringing 1-day view in makes sense, but let's talk about when it makes sense to add 1-day view into your attribution window.
I'll typically say if I notice a bunch of account campaigns are still in learning, and I know it's a higher AOV product, that's the initial sign to me that you need a little more signal into your account. That's the biggest thing. Tony, you touched on that earlier. It's all about the signal and the delivery that we want to provide to Meta. If you are getting out of learning and you're delivering to your targets and your goals, we're not recommending you test into view. We think we're in a good solid spot and we'll keep moving forward on that 7-day click. But if you are really struggling on that volume front, then this is the pathway we recommend going down. And it's not a pathway where you're going to reset your whole account tomorrow to include view. It's going to be in a sequential part of your account. Maybe it's within a top performing campaign that you really believe in, including view in it and doing a strategy behind that test, making sure your targets are inflated. So you'll get a clean read. You can actually track it back to incremental growth on the brand side versus just seeing your return go up in platform and getting more delivery.
Gotcha. So by kind of running, let's say, 1-day view on maybe a best performing campaign or whatever, that gives you a sense of, I mean, this is probably simplistic, but the difference between the 7-day click version and the 7-day 1-day view version gives you some sense of the incrementality difference that you can then apply. If you were to go 1-day view with the rest of your campaigns, you can apply that read to them in order to get a sense of what the difference is and how you should adjust your goals. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and platform too, that breakdown, you're able to report out, even if you're
Mm,
setting up just a 7-day click campaign, you can read your view for including 1-day view in it, which is a
okay.
really cool way initially to see where your conversion volume might be coming from or might not be coming from.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think there's like a connection here to the way CTC thinks about and models on growth strategy, where we have like two kind of like core pathways. One, maximize contribution margin, aka maximize profit, and the other is maximize new customer acquisition, right? There's going to be very different financial like outcomes there from a profit standpoint and a volume standpoint. And I think so much of this for us on the media side connects to that idea that businesses can and are on different pathways and in different seasons. And this whole thing is like so much of CTC in the late 2023 was about like helping our partners like reset from a profit standpoint. And so much of where we're headed is about maintaining that foundation while, and I'll use this phrase again, like opening the aperture for growth. So I'll give you a for example. If we have a partner we're working with and the business is after market share or is in pursuit of something other than bottom line margin, whatever that season is, they're in pursuit of maximum new customer acquisition. We're going to come in and look at how do we deploy more signal into the Meta ads account, potentially through view. How do we pair that with incrementality studies so that we can get the right targets and platform? But we're going to put ourselves in a posture of seeking more volume, right? Based on the business's goal and based on based on the goals that our partners in growth strategy are coming to us with. So we're giving ourselves a bigger toolkit to approach solving the problem in ways that are more aligned.
Yeah. Part of the sense I get too is that in that sort of 2023 period, 2022, 2023, a lot of our clients were in a situation where predictable profitable growth for them was a matter of life and death, but that may not quite be the case anymore. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think, the post-pandemic period was marked by, I think, some macroeconomic factors in the e-commerce industry, like really notably, like financing, access to capital went away fundamentally. And Richard, you've had I can't even count how many conversations with Taylor about this season in e-commerce. So it was such a shift from a really wild growth period coming out of COVID, money everywhere. Nobody cared about profit. So and then a real shift in the other direction where all of these e-commerce businesses had to generate profit to keep their lights on. There's no funding outside of the cash flow they could create with their business operations, right? When you put it through that lens, it makes perfect sense. The CTC media buying strategy met the moment perfectly. Really, really tight control. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've got some interesting things in the news that are creating the potential for us to continue to meet that profit narrative. At the same time, we're smarter now than we were 2 years ago on our measurement stack, and we believe these represent levers and pathways to go back into growth.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So speaking of that and just the general idea of opening the aperture for growth, let's jump into the way we're changing, thinking about segmentation, about audience roles, that sort of thing. So just recap then real quick what we used to do and then what we're moving towards.
Yeah, we would used to go into accounts and take a full acquisition approach. If you had purchased with a brand, does not matter how long ago, we were most likely not targeting you with our ads. We had full new customer strategy. There might be a little bit of retention play in that, but we're kind of shifting that. We're looking at it from a different lens because when you look at that lapsed customer definition, which we can pull in Statless for our clients, it's really great, but we can see this example, 160 days. You hit that point, you're no longer really buying from this brand. You're not maybe familiar with that brand. That's an audience we want to go after. They might not be falling into your marketing existing tactics anymore. We can treat them almost like a new customer to get them back into the fold to be part of all of this again, to re-educate them, maybe show them new products. We don't want to treat them as an existing customer after that point in time, and we do find value in re-engaging them through our system here.
Yeah, this one just gets me so much. I think when in performance marketing, we have kick around these phrases like new customer, existing customer, and I just think about myself practically in my own life. If I buy a T-shirt from you, you don't own me.
Right.
I can go and buy a T-shirt from anyone else at any point in time. And so I am practically and functionally not your customer. And I think this really represents a point where CTC's unique data set is very compelling. So every business has differences in the repeat purchase cycle. And our tool Statless really helps us understand this uniquely for each of our partners. And it's really quite fundamentally different. So I think what Delaney's describing here in this screenshot that's being shown on this table is an example of that data that's coming out of Statless that is showing a individual business's repeat purchase cycle. And what this is saying is for this particular business, 36 days after their first purchase, they have entered a category of default at risk. Yeah, and I think that I think this is such a fun place for us to go and explore and redefine how we think about media buying, as opposed to strictly the whole customer file is excluded from our advertising efforts.
Yeah. So as part of what you're saying then that we have via Statless sort of exclusive or unusual access in a kind of a granular way to this lapsed customer data. So we're actually able to target it in a way that maybe we weren't before or people in general aren't able to target. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'll say
Mm,
too, like, we're not recommending a campaign for your lapsed customers. We're viewing them as part of our NCA efforts. We're looping them in to the efforts that we have going to grow new customers, to treat them, like to your point, Tony, you don't owe me if I only purchase from you once, right? Like, I want to retreat you like a new customer. We're not
mhm.
segmenting them out. We're inclusive.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that kind of goes. That's almost like in some ways a creative thing too, right? There's of a previous or in this previous setup, rather having this idea that for some reason, if somebody hadn't purchased from you in 6 months or in a year or whatever, they're not going to respond to an ad reintroducing them to the brand because, in a sense, of course, they'll recognize you in a way that a brand new customer might not. But what we're saying is that in terms of the actual data shows, they behave as if they're a brand new customer. So what's the point in excluding them? Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I will say
Okay.
too, right? There's brands that do want to put a little bit of spend behind the existing. So from that first purchase day into some of that at risk, that strategy is going to look different, right? The language you can use for them and how you can speak to them, they're already a little familiar with you. Maybe only one purchase, not super familiar, but they have some sort of connection early enough on where your messaging should be different. You see a lot of brands using the same creative for both of those audiences, and that is not the best approach. You won't see as much success as you would if you treated them like the two different audiences that they are.
Gotcha.
Y- Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Sorry, I want to add a couple more things in here too. There's a real, there's an important connection to the size of the business and how big the customer file
Mm,
is in something that we've seen. And there's a connection to this idea of measurement and incrementality, right? So just like there's there's no right or wrong way to approach attribution. It's about understanding the impact of the business. It's not a story of, hey, we shouldn't spend media dollars to talk to our existing customer file. It's about understanding the incrementality of talking to these customer sets, setting targets appropriately, and then delivering as much media dollars as possible at that target in order to re-engage with these people, especially around things like new product offer, new product drops, or sale moments, or especially around any marketing moment. So
right. Okay, cool. So let's jump into, and I touched briefly on creative. We'll get back to that, but let's talk about consolidation real quick. So again, let's kind of go over our former kind of setup was this really strict offer angle audience thing where every single new combination of those three factors got a new campaign with three ads, and there was a very specific way we set it up. Now it sounds like we're moving away from that altogether towards just throwing everything into an ASC is maybe a simplified way of saying it, but why don't you describe for us, Delaney, like what this consolidation looks like for us?
Yeah, and I'll say too, so we weren't just doing it based on audience offer and angle. We would have multiple campaigns with the same audience offer and angle. Like anytime there was a new creative delivery, we gave it a new campaign to give it a chance. And we're moving away from that. And we want to find ourselves asking the question is, what is so different about this creative? Is there something so different about it? Is there a different attribution or bidding method that you want? And if you're finding yourself saying yes, that is a good reason to launch a new campaign. And we think of things like a new product launch, a promotion,
Hmm.
those testing pieces. Most times you're going to find yourself saying no. And if you don't find yourself saying no, you probably should be saying no. And it's going to lead to more consolidation. There's a couple of different ways you can approach this. In the world of cost controls, it's really important that your campaigns have similar AOVs. Because if you're setting a cost control and you have varying AOVs, you're not going to deliver the way that you need to. So that's a big focus as we are setting up this new consolidated approach. We're looking at the AOV and the margin for all of our products and really defining different categorizations of this to set up these campaigns. And then within those campaigns, you have the ability now to have some ad sets. So if you are truly reaching a totally different audience with your creative, very diverse, different messaging, that deserves a new ad set within an already existing campaign. It does not deserve a brand new campaign, which is the way that we used to go where Black Friday, we had close to 100 campaigns live, right? We never want to see that again. We want to be more consolidated while still giving us the control to reach new audiences.
Gotcha. And just to clarify for everybody, are we still doing one ad per ad set?
No, we can go up to 50. Maybe
Well,
not. Yeah, you can. So ASC is actually capping a limit now. So you can't do 150, but you can go up to 50. So if you have already an existing ad set with the similar audience offer and angle, don't create a new one. Put it into the
mm,
existing one and build on that and see if you can take over a top performer, see how things stabilize out. That's your true read on if I'm seeing a winner or not. If we just start launching new ad sets for every new delivery, we're going to get into the same approach, right? So we want to make sure that we're strategically thinking about where the creative is going and then talking about the difference in the creative that we can get.
right. Gotcha. I realized as I asked that question, what I really meant was, are we still doing one ad set per campaign, which is what we used to do, which you have already
Yeah.
obviously
Also, no
answered. So multiple ad sets. Yeah, exactly.
things.
So actually, so it might be useful to see if we get something out of this. So you have like a very specific way of thinking about when a new campaign should be launched, which is, do I need a new setting? The most common sort of scenario under which that happens is if you're launching a product
Mhm.
or a campaign rather that pushes to a different AOV than something else.
Mhm.
So in terms of building a new ad set, and you've already touched on this a little bit, but what is kind of like the one thing or the sort of rubric that you use to determine whether a new one gets built? Is it angle and audience, or is there something else at play there?
Yeah, essentially, yes. I'll use just okay. We have a generic retail apparel brand that we want to set up this structure for. There's a lot of different products you can advertise for, maybe very similar AOVs. You could be advertising, athletic apparel for the person that wants to go to hit up a gym, work out, do all of that in their apparel. You could also be advertising it to the mom that wants to run errands and be comfortable with what she's doing with her kids. Two very different audiences that should have very different looking creatives. And in that sense, that could justify two ad sets within a campaign that are very similar products, but we're trying to go after two very diverse audiences with them.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay. So let's jump into kind of like the final ish piece of the puzzle here, which is creative. And I think that arguably this is the most important part, and there's kind of a major way that we're shifting it. So let's talk about again the fundamental shift away from the way that we used to think about volume towards diversification.
Yeah, Meta's preaching creative. That's something that we also really strongly believe in too. That's how you're going to reach new audiences. And we're having a lot of conversations with clients too, where we're trying to break away from this mindset of creating concepts, but we're creating diverse ads with them. We're defining the persona we want to reach, and we're using that to get to that diverse audience for us. And we have a cheat sheet that we like to use with our clients too that helps us define what is different. What does it mean to look different? To the eye, it can be a little not the easiest to tell what difference is, but we really do rely back on this as a helpful like starting block. Meta supports this as well of how you can define it because it can get really granular, but it can also be as simple as a static product shot and a whole UGC lifestyle variants. That's a very two different diverse creatives for the same product.
Mm.
This is such an interesting thing because we've been doing all this conversation around YouTube recently, and it's just so fascinating. In the Google Ads world, in the YouTube world, audience targeting is still a thing. You got to go in there and target this audience and that audience, and it's very clear to me how different the targeting algorithms work between Google Ads and YouTube specifically and Meta. And the difference is, if you haven't read the meta engineering blog post about Andromeda and the machine learning technology that underpins the targeting in meta ads, the very simple way to understand it is what we've said for years: the creative targets the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if you have a picture of men in your ads, your ad is going to target men. If you have a picture of women in your ad's going to target women. And this is the reason, like the whole reason why the shift on Meta from doing audience and interest targeting to broad targeting has worked, because the machine learning understands what's in the visual ad unit itself. And this is why I think, Delaney, we've seen examples of where we've worked with partners that have said, I'm producing tons of creative. And we're saying, well, wait a minute, that's all product on color block, as a for example. And that's not what we're saying. It's not about tons of creative. It's about a high volume of really different creative. And that's how we access different audiences.
Yeah. So talk to me about, you mentioned a high volume of different creative. How has our relationship to volume changed? So obviously there has to be diversification is an important part of that. But prior to sort of this shift, a lot of our kind of creative volume, the way we thought about creative volume was around, this is the cost cap. Therefore, in order to get through budget, you are going to need 75 ads to get through all that budget next month, whatever the case may be. How do we think about, how is our relationship to volume itself then shifted? Is it similar? Is it still we're cranking out 100 ads? Or is it just basically adding another layer of difficulty on top of our previous volume requirement? How would you think about that?
So, actually, the volume piece of the puzzle is still very much built on the idea of like how much spend we can get
Right.
through ad units in any given ad. And Richard, I'm sure you've been part of the conversations and discussions around Compass and the creative planning, creative volume planning work that we're doing on the Statless side to help continue to answer that question. So I think, so Compass is helping us continue to get to what that number is. And the number is different for every business. But what I'm seeing, and Delaney, you tell me if you agree or disagree, is that you would be much better off producing 20 different ads that are really different in style, based on the cheat sheet that Delaney was showing, versus 200 very similar ads.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Meta has reports they can pull for brands too that shows their creative similarity reports. And essentially, when your creative is too similar, it's going to be deprioritized in the algorithm. And we see that a lot with brands who can throw out a high volume of creatives. You only see a couple of them really take off. And we're asked that question of, okay, well, how do I get more spend here? Why is it not spending? And it all comes back to the diversification of that volume. It's all the same, essentially. It's going after the same audience. You don't need all that. You need 20 very different ads reaching different audiences and different formats to see a greater success.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So there's a clear then, I'm just kind of, what we've seen is that there's a clear penalty, algorithmic penalty to cranking out 100 variations with slightly different like colored backgrounds or something like that.
If you make 100, like let's just use the format, for example. If you make 100 static ad images that all look similar, in the eyes of Meta, you have made one ad.
Interesting. Interesting.
That might be a little bit extreme, but versus if you made one static image with product on white, a product on background, you made a video, if you made something creator, something UGC, if you had some really highly polished stuff, some lifestyle stuff, now you've made however many I just said, 6 or 8 variations.
Right. Well, no, there's an interesting like calculator tool in that, like how many ads have you really made across like a number of different. So if to what extent then is like how many of the variables that are on this cheat sheet right now have to be different in order for Meta to recognize it as being, let's say, multiple ads?
I'd say like creative approach, those things are very, very different. If you have the same static image and a couple of different aspect ratios, they're still similar, right? You're going to probably put those in the same ad still. You're not going to break them up into 2 or 3 different ads because that would be similar. So some of that, like it's best practices to have those asset ratios, but you have it in one ad. It's not going to get you the volume you need like a different creative approach, like lo-fi creative versus a higher polished brand video would.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think I was just going to say, like, this is a fundamental question, like at the root level. So the production, like the very starting point, the genesis of the ad needs to come from a different place, whether that's I'm shooting product photography by itself, or I'm shooting lifestyle photography of the person using the product, or I have UGC. So it really starts fundamentally at the very root level, the production level. Everything after that sort of root production is some sort of permutation of it, right? Whether it's an aspect ratio or a placement or a call to action. That I think it's really about thinking about how do we create really different types of production. And Delaney, we're seeing like the efficacy of this with, in our partnerships where we have our creator content offering. I think what's really interesting actually about that, just add a little side note, is where we're seeing the most efficacy from introducing that is into accounts that don't have that style of content already. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Adding that to account that has not seen it before, it performs really, really well because it's so different from what it's used to seeing in the algorithm for that brand.
Yeah. So this is like really a question of like whatever you're really good at right now. Like if you're really good at, let's just say you're really good at producing like super hi-fi content, like everything is super polished. You need to go and do what you're uncomfortable with. That's exactly where you need to go. You need to go produce the thing that you're not producing now. And it probably makes you feel uncomfortable and squishy and weird, but that's precisely what Meta is asking us for with the algorithm that's saying, hey, this is how you're going to reach new audiences.
Interesting. So you had mentioned Delaney. I think that sometimes it can be difficult to tell what counts as being sort of different enough. So, but then it also sounds like we're kind of saying that like as human beings, if an account visually looks to us as all the same, then the algorithm is able to see it the same way, and that's maybe a good indicator that everything's too samey. But what are some of the factors that Meta may read as being different enough that we as humans like can't really tell visually?
Yeah, it's usually a very, like, different background. If we are talking, like, model shots, the environment that they're in needs to be totally different. Even the same model across all these different backgrounds, activities could be flagged as the same because it's the same person that looks the
Mhm.
same. It's gonna reach the same audience. So you need to be thinking about the models you're using, the spaces that you're using them in. If it's the background with static shots that look so different, how are you laying and displaying the product to look different? Even if it's folded up, laying down, different colors, different, even textures on the background to flip it up could help push you in the direction of diversification.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, there's lots to dig into there, but for the sake of our pod now, let's move on to our kind of final step here, which is around mid funnel and testing. So talk about how we're testing into mid funnel objectives. As somebody who's been at CTC for a long time, I can't believe I'm seeing this. So tell me a little bit more about kind of what this means for us.
I'm really excited for this one. And I think it's like very different and new to what we're talking about. And that can be a little intimidating at first, but it can be a big unlock for brands. And I'll start by saying we're not recommending investing 50% of your budget into this space by any means. We're talking about testing into it with a smaller allocation of your budget for specific brands that we think it could be a big unlock. It really helps with warming up the audience for certain products. It's back to the same conversation we were having about adding in view. This is a place that could be really, really impactful for higher AOV businesses and products to really have a longer consideration window. And we're only saying we have a 7-day window in Meta. Maybe we need to warm them up and test in the mid funnel for something like a landing page view or a certain amount of engagement on the page. We know that's a qualified user, and we can then go track how our remarketing audiences are doing once launching something like this. It's a bigger picture that we want to embrace when we're looking. We've been really, really good at looking at in platform efficiency and the return we're driving and how that correlated to the business. That's not going to be the case with this. You're not going to see your return hit with this campaign optimizing for landing page views, but you're gonna feel the impact in other places of your business and other places in your account, and that can be a little scary to see at first and challenging to have that initial conversation, but it is a big unlock when you have it paired with the right information in your creative. This is another piece of the diverse creative. You wanna be explaining more in this place. For example, if we mentioned furniture earlier, if we wanna sell couple $1,000 piece of furniture, I want to be explaining what the value of this is to the viewer. I want to be showing and demonstrating maybe a perfect place for some UGC and getting them to the site with even more information to add to cart. And then we're going to rehit them in other
Mm,
campaigns with the more action oriented purchase approach.
gotcha.
It is different, Richard, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just part of this, all part of this same journey. Like, and think about the journey as like building blocks. Like CTC is never gonna not make ourselves responsible for the financial outcome that we agree to with our partners. That's just it. And a fundamental part of like creating that financial outcome is going to be a large portion of your media investment on cost control bidding and a really strict financial outcome. What we're doing on the media side is we're looking to expand our toolkit into what else can we try and attempt to produce more volume, to increase the efficacy of all of our bottom of funnel outcomes. But never are we going to do that at the expense of the ultimate financial outcome that we've agreed upon with our partners in growth strategy. So I've been saying this thing that I'm not sure how popular it is yet. Like Taylor kind of looks at me sideways when I say it, but I feel like on the media side, we're like the gas pedal. Like we want to put our foot down. We want to go explore. We want to find pockets of wins through the exploration into 7-day click, 1-day view in the right cases, mid funnel objectives. A lot of the stuff that we're doing on YouTube, these are all like gas pedal sort of exploration things. Our partners in growth strategy, and I don't think break is the right metaphor here, but they're keeping us honest on the media side, right? We have a financial obligation to contribute to the business, and we have to do that. This is all wrapped in the lens of we on the media side want to be part. We have to be the engine of growth. There's no other way. We can't cut our way to growth. We have to find ways to explore.
Yeah. That makes sense. So we're a little over time here, so I think we can wrap it up here. But what I usually like to ask on every podcast is for people who, like, say, aren't a CTC client or aren't part of the ecosystem yet, what is the one thing that you need to do to prep for some of these changes that are coming, or to begin to apply some of these best practices to your own ad account?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say as you prep and you think about this, it can be very different than what you are used to. And I go back to one of our very first kind of conversation points we had is having that sequential approach to how you're going to do things and having agreement with your brand, how you want to set up your campaigns. What does AOV look like by your products? Who are your audiences? Having all of those hard conversations to get your account structure really, really solid, and then diving into these other pieces of cost controls, looking at attribution windows, talking about testing. And you got to do that all from the lens of creative. It is really, really driven by creative and the volume and diversity you can get from what you currently have or partners to get you further.
Yeah. Tony, what do you think?
Just one. I got to give you just one.
Yeah, let's keep it a one.
Incrementality measurement. Because your job, listen, let me make this really simple. Your job in media is to spend more media dollars than you did the month before or the year before. And you have to generate return on that. And the way that we're finding pathways to do that is with new pathways to do that is by better understanding incrementality.
Cool. All right. Well, wise words from both of you. We'll wrap it up here, but we'll have some of the visuals from the deck that Delaney's been sharing with us in the YouTube video. So if you're listening, go check out the YouTube as well to see some of those. That'll be helpful. But until next time, thanks folks for listening. Thank you, Delaney. Thank you, Tony, for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.